This is reading from St. Thomas Aquinas's Summa Theologica. This copy was purchased by my father in 1963, and it is the first English translation of the Summa Theologica, which was published in 1943. I'm starting at question 58 on justice. We must now consider justice. Under this head, there are 12 points of inquiry. What is justice? Whether justice is always towards another, whether it is a virtue, whether it is the will as its subject, whether it is a general virtue, whether, as a general virtue, it is essentially the same as every virtue, whether there is a particular justice, whether particular justice has a matter of its own, whether it is about passions or about operations only, whether the mean of justice is the real mean, whether the act of justice is to render to everyone his own, whether justice is the chief of the moral virtues. First article. Whether justice is fittingly defined as being the perpetual and constant will to render to each one his rights. We proceed to the first article. Objection 1. It would seem that lawyers have unfittingly defined justice as being the perpetual and constant will to render to each one his right. For, according to the philosopher, Ethics, Volume 1, justice is a habit which makes a man capable of doing what is just, and of being just in action and in intention. Now, will denotes a power, or also an act. Therefore, justice is unfittingly defined as being a will. Objection 2. Further, rectitude of the will is not the will. Else, if the will were its own rectitude, it would follow that no will is unrighteous. Yet, according to Anselm, justice is rectitude. Therefore, justice is not the will. Further, objection 3. Further, no will is perpetual save God's. If, therefore, justice is a perpetual will, in God alone will there be justice. Objection 4. Further, whatever is perpetual is constant, since it is unchangeable. Therefore, it is needless in defining justice to say that it is both perpetual and constant. Objection 5. Further, it belongs to the sovereign to give each one his right. Therefore, if justice gives each one his right, it follows that it is in none but the sovereign, which is absurd. Objection 6. Further, Augustine says that justice is love serving God alone. Therefore, it does not render to each one his right. I answer that the aforesaid definition of justice is fitting if understood aright. For since every virtue is a habit that is the principle of a good act, a virtue must needs be defined by means of the good act bearing on the matter proper to that virtue. Now, the proper matter of justice consists of those things that belong to our intercourse with other men, as shall be shown further on. Hence, the act of justice in relation to its proper matter and object is indicated in the words, rendering to each one his right, since, as Isidore says, a man is said to be just because he respects the rights of others. Now, in order that an act bearing upon any matter whatever be virtuous, it requires to be voluntary, stable, and firm, because the philosopher says that in order for an act to be virtuous, it needs first of all to be done knowingly, secondly, to be done by choice, and for a due end, thirdly, to be done immovably. Now, the first of these is included in the second, since what is done through ignorance is involuntary. Hence, the definition of justice mentions first the will, in order to show that the act of justice must be voluntary, and mention is made afterwards of its constancy and perpetuity, in order to indicate the firmness of the act. Accordingly, this is a complete definition of justice, save that the act is mentioned instead of the habit, which takes its species from the act, because habit implies relation to act. And if anyone would reduce it to the proper form of a definition, he might say that justice is a habit whereby a man renders to each one his due by a constant and perpetual will. And this is about the same definition as that given by the philosopher, Ethics, Volume 5, who says that Justice is a habit whereby a man is said to be capable of doing just actions in accordance with his choice. Reply to objection 1. Will here denotes the act, not the power, and it is customary among writers to define habits by their acts. Thus, Augustine says that faith is to believe what one sees not. Reply to objection 2. Justice is the same as rectitude, not essentially but casually, for it is a habit which rectifies the deed in the will. Reply to objection 3. The will may be called perpetual in two ways. First, on the part of the will's act, which endures forever, and thus God's will alone is perpetual. Secondly, on the part of the subject, because, to wit, a man wills to do a certain thing always, and this is a necessary condition of justice. For it does not satisfy the condition of justice that one wish to observe justice in some particular matter for the time being, because one could scarcely find a man willing to act unjustly in every case. And it is a requisite that one should have the will to observe justice at all times and in all cases. Reply to objection 4. Since perpetual does not imply perpetuity of the act of the will, it is not superfluous to add constant. For while the perpetual will denotes the purpose of the observing justice always, constant signifies a firm perseverance in this purpose. Reply to objection 5. A judge renders to each one what belongs to him by way of a command and direction, because a judge is the personification of justice and the sovereign is its guardian. On the other hand, subjects render to each other what belongs to him by way of execution. Reply to objection 6. Just as love of God includes love of our neighbor, as stated above, question 25, answer 1, so too the service of God includes rendering to each one his due. And I'll stop here.